Tracy Brennan. I'm one of the Vice Presidents of the PPMA, standing in for the wonderful Leeson today. I'm working very differently in a cafe in York, so I'm mixing shopping with working differently. So welcome to our session today. Hopefully a really good, engaging session. We've got a short period of time, and I'm already warned that this is a fantastic subject that will create lots and lots of interest and debate. So you are asked, if you've got any questions, if you can put those into the chat. We may not get through all of those, but I'm sure my colleagues from Osborne Thomas will outline how we might address those as we go through the session. So we have got some wonderful colleagues from Osborne Thomas, as I say, who are one of our sponsors from the PPMA, and we've got Kate and we've got Julie. So I'm going to hand over to Julie, and good luck with the session, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you.
Hello, hi. Thanks for that, Tracy. I am Julie Osborne. I am the Managing Director of Osborne Thomas. Hopefully today I can see by the numbers how important this particular issue is for everybody out there. We've done a couple of sessions already, which has created huge debate. I'm really conscious with the amount of people on this call that we probably won't get to all of those questions. So if we don't get to answer them today, we will come back to you. And indeed, anything that you've found in terms of challenges that you want to discuss, then please put it into the chat and we'll come back to you on it. For those of you who don't know Osborne Thomas, we've been created just over 10 years ago. We are a specialist recruitment organisation within inside the public sector, both on permanent and interim vacancies. So therefore, this affects us as much as it affects you in terms of the conversations that we're having with candidates when we're recruiting on behalf of your authorities. One of the interesting things is that when we set up Osborne Thomas, we decided that we would be a virtual organisation, and that was 11 years ago. So 11 years ago, we made the commitment to doing this. So we're watching everybody else learn what we learned when we first started doing this. So we've got a lot of experience at doing this, and a lot of experience of having this workforce that you can't see, touch and feel every single day, and how we communicate effectively with each other. So really conscious of time, I will hand over to my colleague, Kate, who will take you through the presentation, some real stats for you to grab hold of, as well as some insights from other authorities and indeed ourselves. Kate.
Thanks, Julie. So yes, I'm Kate Wilson. I'm the Development Manager at Osborne Thomas. Been here for about 2 years, spent most of that locked up at home, like all of us, but nice to see you all. Thank you for coming. So we've been living through what I think is probably the biggest change in working patterns since the Industrial Revolution. Technology was clearly already pushing us in that direction, but with the impact of COVID, clearly that whole sort of element has been speeded up in the sense of how we work and the working patterns that we adopt. As the threat's receding, if it is receding, I'm not quite sure where we are on that. Don't think any of us are. People are, like ourselves and like you, reviewing the learnings of the last 19, 20 months and what changes that were made to the working practices and policies at that time, and what we kind of thinking about maintaining as a result of that, and actually having and also thinking about what we're not going to maintain. It's been really interesting pulling this together. As Julie said, we've got so many different views. I'm really hoping that this will be an interesting slide deck for you. There's a lot of stats to start with, just in terms of looking at the general market, but hopefully it will provoke a little bit of interest and some thought-provoking elements. This quote here is designed to rattle people. I'm sure a lot of people on this call will have been on the receiving end of a comment like this. You know, what do you think we've all been doing the last 19, 20 months? You know, of course, we've been working. So we thought we'd take a look at the market overall initially. So I think generally we all are aware that there has been a huge increase in terms of the number of job postings and the number of roles that people are needing to go out to recruit to. So we thought we'd have a look at the REC, so the Recruitment and Employment Confederation. This is a chart that's kind of logging the number of job postings that have been in the market. And you can see here that, well, a huge spike since the earlier part of this year. But it's interesting that in the week 15th of October, and that's the last set of stats I could get hold of, job advertisements were up 600,000. That's like 36% since the end of August. So just that in that short period of time. In the week the 4th to the 10th of October, there were 235,000 new job postings alone. That's the second highest figure that the REC has recorded ever since they started collating the data. The other thing that the REC has also reported is that almost every upper tier local authority is recording an increase in vacancies. Don't have the figures for lower tier authorities, but we suspect that the trend is probably similar. This growth in employer demand is actually being supported by John Gray, who's the VP of MZ Burning Glass. For those of you that don't know, Burning Glass Technologies allows both policy and decision makers to understand and plan changes within the job market for the future. So he really reinforces this, and typically he focuses on local authority recruitment, and particularly those hard to fill roles. I imagine that probably resonates with some of you in the sense of that increase in hard to fill roles needing to be fulfilled. Interestingly, the CIPD has also reported on that in the sense of a 10% increase in hard to fill roles coming to the market. So we thought we'd have a little bit of a closer look at that in the sense of we went to the CIPD. So that chart on the right-hand side gives you an indication as to where those hard to fill vacancies are by sector. Clearly, there's no surprise there in terms of healthcare, manufacturing, hospitality being right up there at the top. But interestingly, public sector and education are not that far behind. Admittedly, we know that a lot of those are quite low-level roles. So the impact of Brexit, which I'm sure you'll all be familiar with, has really put some pressure on organisations like you being able to recruit cleaners and catering staff, support workers, HGV drivers. But in our experience, interestingly, on the left-hand side, we work predominantly at sort of 40k plus market. These are the sorts of areas that we're seeing the hard to fill vacancies falling into. So place and neighbourhoods and communities, those roles, you know, environmentally led, transport, parking, highways, there's been a huge increase there in terms of the roles needing to be fulfilled. And I think we probably understand that from the COVID response point of view. But equally, professional services appears to be ongoing in terms of those specific areas. So data and analytics has interestingly come up an awful lot. And again, I think that's probably because of the COVID point of view. Many of these roles, I think, are coming about also as a result of transformation. I imagine that a number of you on this call are going through transformation programs, whether that's town centre redevelopments, restructuring your senior teams, your executive teams. Social care is an ongoing battle. When you look at the individual job types, again, because of transformation programs, we're seeing a lot more directors and assistant directors coming to the market. That then has a knock-on effect to heads of service. And then in addition to that, we're seeing a lot of project management roles coming to the market for short-term projects. So we're seeing a lot of FTCs emerging, maybe because there's not the commitment to a permanent salary. But yes, that's been a big spike for us in terms of the roles that we're working on. So what are employees, or employers rather, planning to do to kind of alleviate these hard to fill vacancies? Again, the chart on the right-hand side will be familiar with you in terms of looking at apprenticeship programs, graduates. We know that organisations are looking at remuneration. I've spoken to a couple of local authorities in the last couple of weeks who are able to be thinking about salary increments and market supplements. Job quality, I think that's quite interesting in terms of looking at clearer career pathways, looking at developing skill sets, and being able to, I suppose, manipulate people into perhaps slightly different roles and develop new ways of working. What I do find quite interesting is that 14% are planning to do nothing to alleviate their roles. So good luck to them. What I do find quite fascinating is that flexible working doesn't appear on that list at all. I wonder whether that's because people are still thinking about their flexible working policies. Again, conversations we've been having with a lot of people is nobody's actually nailed down their hybrid working policies at the moment. There's a nervousness, and people, I think, are kind of waiting to see maybe what the winter brings, maybe where COVID is going. But yes, people aren't necessarily thinking about how that could impact the candidate. And that's actually quite interesting, because when you look at our experience of where candidates are at the moment and the people that we're speaking to on a regular basis, 65% want a sense of real purpose in their jobs. 80% want, their work to have a greater meaning. That's actually having quite a big impact in terms of, we're talking to private sector candidates seriously considering wanting to make that shift into the public sector. Over a third of employees are considering a change of sector or type of work. That just reinforces what I've just said. 53% of employees are highlighting being able to work from home for at least some of the time. These figures, incidentally, are within the last quarter, if you're wondering where I've got those figures from. So for us, and I'm sure you're experiencing, it's really become an employee or candidate market. And there is real resistance, I think, in a lot of areas where people are just not wanting to return to the office. And you'll be familiar with some of those reasons. Why do I need to go back into the office? I can work just as effectively at home in my pajamas, and I'm not affecting my day-to-day work. And actually, a lot of people have been reporting that they've been able to get things done a lot faster because there's been less bureaucracy in the processes that they're having to adopt. Also, a commute. Why do I want to commute? Why do I want to spend lots of money on a train fare, and then all the subsistence that comes with it on a day-to-day basis? Technology, we've got the technology. We've proved that we can do it. A lot of us probably never even heard of Zoom 18 months ago, but we certainly know how to use it now. There is an element of the carbon footprint. Obviously, the climate change media coverage, etc., is huge at the moment because of what's going on up in Glasgow. I think that's a whole other topic area, so we're not going to focus on that today, but it's just something to think about in terms of consideration. And yeah, there's a bit of a lack of confidence. How safe is it really in the office? Are people social distancing? People have different views on that. So how excuse me. So how are some employers responding? We've had a lot of conversations, as you know. People are looking at hot desking, rota systems. The likes of Camden were already doing that. They built their new offices at King's Cross that are only able to hold a third of the workforce at any one time. Kingston's looking at sort of local touchdown spots that people can tap into. Flexible working patterns, hybrid working policies. We spoke to a couple of people in the private sector. And interestingly, there were a couple of things here where one organisation is looking to say, well, the working week can be Monday to Sunday, and you can choose whichever days you want to work. Another organisation is saying, well, let's be selective about bank holiday. So you can take your bank holiday if you want to, but if you rather work that bank holiday, you can take the holiday another day. So there's all sorts of different models being tested, I suppose, in the market. But there's no actual sort of finite decision in terms of do we continue with it or not. I think this is quite a nice quote. It's by Charles Handy. It actually comes from a leadership book, which is called Spiritual Leadership by Henry and Richard Blackaby. And I think this quote could have actually been written about the last 19 months in the sense of what we've been trying to deal with. And ditto, I saw this on the tube. I was travelling through a tube station, so I took a photo of it. I think we all have heard this expression. If we carry on like we were pre-COVID, I revert back to where we were, nothing's going to change. We're not going to move forward. So I thought that's quite a nice quote. So whilst you're still thinking about your hybrid working policies and trying to perhaps nail down some decisions on that, there are some things that you could be doing to maybe help your recruitment and those hard to fill roles. So I just thought I'd give a quick slide on this. Obviously, it's a candidate driven market. That's why I've got the candidate right in the middle. But when you are thinking about going out to the market, take the time to consider that role. What's the market looking like? What's the external perception of your organisation? Too often, recruitment comes up, rush, 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 let's get the role out. And actually what that results in is ultimately a poor hire, or quite often a poor hire. So take the time. Cost is obviously a big issue for local authorities and other public sector organisations. If you are rushing and you're not thinking about everything, you'll be spending money unnecessarily and having to go out again. Location. I'm just going to ask this question, and hopefully someone could put something in the chat on this. Does it matter if you recruit someone who doesn't come from your local community? We've seen a lot more hires recently of people coming from other parts of the country because they can work from home. Your brand. I'm passionate about employer branding, which winds Julie up enormously. But in the sense of, what are people saying about you? What does your website say? What are your social feeds? What are the messages that are being put out to the market? Are they compelling? And are they the sorts of things that any prospective candidate is going to want to think, oh, okay, that sounds like a really good organisation. And your employees too, actually. Collaboration, I think, is key. So when you are looking at candidates, let's say you get an application come through in the first few days of a job going live, and it's a really good candidate, why wait 2.5 weeks until the closing date to actually have that initial conversation with them? Engage them, be collaborative with them, help them. So around it all is flexibility. That's just a bit of a top tip from us in terms of recruitment. So this is just a really good example of an organisation who clearly has no understanding of the candidate market at the moment. I have blinded it. This is a really hard to fill role, Head of Legal and Governance. I'm sure you'll all be aware of that. We picked this up off LinkedIn. Well, how boring does that job look? It does not inspire me at all to think, okay, I want to go and work for that borough council. But more shockingly, when I got to the end of it, it tells me down here on the bottom how to apply, right-hand side, that to complete my application, it's going to take me 2 hours. 2 hours? I haven't got time for that, So don't be putting blocks in the way, if you like, in terms of your whole recruitment process, because candidates, they've got choices at the moment. They've got offers coming in left, right and centre. So, don't put that kind of block in the way. So where are you? Back to hybrid working. Might you be here? I've already mooted this. Lots of deliberations, thoughts going on about hybrid working policies and patterns. But I think equally you're worried about your corporate culture, that corporate culture that you had in place potentially before COVID. You may have lost some of that over the last 20 months or so. What can you do to perhaps improve communications and enable that to continue? That goes back to the question of, does it matter if you recruit someone from miles away? Politicians, I think there's very differing opinions all over the country with regards to where politicians and members are face to face, not making sure everyone's coming back into the office. Are you worried about losing your employees at the moment because you're perhaps being inflexible? I would be if I was working for an authority that I spoke to yesterday, whose plan long term is to go back to working 5 days a week in the office. Good luck to them on that, because they will lose employees and it will not make them an attractive option for new candidates thinking about joining them. Are you concerned about your local connectivity? I think I've said enough about that at the moment. And then, are you worried about your technology? Why? We've been doing it for the last 20 months and I'm doing it very well. And I don't believe that any council has fallen over as yet in terms of not being able to work in these different ways. So there's a summary of kind of the workforce themes of today. It's not finite, it's not exhaustive, and actually the list just gets longer and longer and longer. I won't go through the details because I think I've covered that off enough. And that brings me to the end, hopefully in good time. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. And we've had a message saying location matters for some posts, but not for others. Absolutely, we're not advocating the fact that everything works for everybody. And what we don't want to do is try and create a two-tier system where the working from home does work for some, but it can't work for others. So some of the things that Kate's mentioned, particularly around things like looking at things like bank holidays and the way in which people can use bank holidays differently, allows people in other areas of the organisation to be able to take those things on board, whereas they can't do the working from home aspect. So not all of it is one size fits all, and it's never going to be. And it's putting together sort of a flexibility package that says you can pick and choose somehow from these lists, depending on what area you work in within inside the organisation. I think we've got a couple of questions, Kate, that sent directly to you.
Yes. Let's have a look. Not sure if I can work out how to get into those, sorry. Steve, that's question come from you, I think.
Yeah, it come from me. I'll ask them so everybody knows. Yeah, welcome, Julie and Kate. Thank you very much for the informative discussion there. For me, a couple of thoughts was just in terms of the fixed term roles that you're starting to see, do you think that's maybe a reflection of the world of work now, and the fact that thinking, okay, look, project-based roles or even other sort of roles, we don't necessarily, if we've been working more remotely, then perhaps fixed term contracts might be also more suitable for us, rather thinking about those kinds of piecemeal approaches to work and remote working. So do you think it's a reflection of the state of work that we're in at the moment?
I think fixed term roles have been coming up for quite a while now, the last sort of couple of years. I think there's a couple of things. I think there's one in terms of authorities knowing they need somebody for a year, and the cost against hiring an interim for a period of 12 months. The cost is a huge differential. I think the problem with some of the fixed term roles is they're trying to get it into the difficult to fill areas. Now, I've got a choice. I'm a candidate. I've got a choice. I've got a full-time job, I've got an interim job, or I've got an FTC. The FTC is going to come third. So I think it depends what areas it is. We've successfully recruited FTCs, and we have failed in other areas to recruit FTCs. And it's when it becomes very difficult and when everybody's in the market looking at the same thing all at the same time. So I think there's lots of different reasons, Steve, as to why there's more FTCs. My view is probably high on the list is cost.
That's useful. The other question I had was just in terms of the some of your clients. Do you think that in terms of the more senior roles that you've been recruiting, like directors, have they voiced an expectation maybe that they'd like to see them a bit more visible at the workplace, or have they been very relaxed in terms of the remote approach? Just wondered. My sense is that they are expecting, you know, the director roles or whatever to maybe show their face a little bit more in the workplace than others.
I think it depends how you do it. We had a very interesting conversation with the chief executive the other day on just this very subject, where he was explaining that there was an issue with inside the borough in terms of rubbish down a back street, and he needed to be visible. He needed to go down there physically to go and calm a situation down for himself, for the politicians, and for the residents. So yes, you need to have some kind of, does he need to be there every day? Does he need to go 5 days a week to go and have a look at this rubbish? No. But yes, I think the higher up the chain you are, you do need some visibility. But does it have to be 5 days a week? And also, if you're hiring at that level, those people surely know that. They surely appreciate that they need to have that visibility inside not only the office and with the people that they work with, but also with the residents, depending on what level of job it is and what they're actually doing. Someone's just asked what an FTC is, fixed term contract. Does that sort of answer that for you, Steve? You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. No, that was fine, Julie. Yeah, no, it's just what I expected, really. I was just in terms of the clients, actually expressed it. But as you say, I mean, the expectation I would have thought is obvious on certain roles. You maybe be expected to be there in person a little bit more than you might otherwise.
Absolutely. I think there's lots of things that we are learning on a daily, weekly basis in terms of what others are doing. And I really appreciate, given the size of the group that's on this call today, it's very difficult to start asking loads and loads of questions. So one of the things that we're looking at is putting together some more round table sessions of smaller groups, perhaps regionally. So we'll have a chat with PPMA about looking at doing something like that so that we can start to debate some of these issues that all of you are facing. I think I'll go back to the slide that Kate put up. Doing things like we've done before is not going to work in this market. To attract the best candidates, flexibility is now key. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before Tracy moves us to potentially wrapping up?
I think I just tried to put it on the chat. I don't know whether it's come through, but I suppose I was asking the question around, do flexible working policies matter anymore?
Interesting. Anyone got a view on that?
I'd say that I think that organisations, in theory, that they don't, but I think the fact is that the staff themselves want, if you like, a bit of a framework just to understand what the expectations are of them. So I think they're helpful. That's my sense, is that it comes more from the staff base than necessarily the organisation. But it's just then how you frame that, how loose or tight, or can you make it loose and tight in the same kind of policy so that people understand that there is that flexibility. And it's also, I think, about how you work with your colleagues. So different services or different teams have different requirements.
Yes, exactly. There's no one size fits all. Your hybrid working policy will have a number of tranches to it, I think, in terms of whatever discipline or level of person that is working in that organisation.
Yeah, I think Philip's just said, where is your contractual place of work if you're a hybrid worker? No one's bothered about that for the last 2 years, and everyone's just carried on. So there is an element of the fact that things happened very, very quickly, and we could do nothing about it. Productivity didn't dip. Somebody said to me the other day, we used to have somebody in the office that never worked, and you knew they never worked, and they were shopping online just because they turned up in an office 9 till 5. Does it matter that I can't see them physically anymore? They're still doing what they were doing before. So I think there's lots of things that need to be taken into account, and I'm not saying that we have the answers to all of these things. What we're saying at the moment is that the candidates are sort of king in this market right now, and flexibility is top of their list. So I'd like to thank you for joining. I hope you found it informative, and I will hand back to Tracy to close the meeting down.
Thanks, Julie and Kate. That was really, really insightful. And whilst in what 20 or so minutes, I've certainly thought very much about your statement around smarter recruitment. And whereas previously we may have talked about, do we have an application form or a CV? It's much more focused on the employer offer, isn't it? And like you say, it's a candidate market. So I'd like to thank you very much for the session today. I'm sure everybody's got some nuggets of information there. I certainly have. So thanks ever so much for that. And I look forward to having further sessions with you. Just as a reminder for everybody, we've got another similar webinar next Friday at 12 o'clock. And we've got Jason from Tripad joining us, with Richmond and Wandsworth Council, looking at engaging stakeholders in the recruitment process to deliver the best talent. So it's one of a theme. So please join us next Friday. And thanks ever so much again, and have a lovely weekend, everybody. Thank you.